Line worker. Have you ever been in the middle of a Be Amazed video when all of a sudden, blackout? Pretty annoying, isn't it? But if you thought it was bad for you, spare a thought for the workers in charge of fixing the power outages. Line workers are responsible for carrying out repair work to high voltage power lines to restore electricity. To start with, they're tasked with scaling utility poles, which, depending on the height and accessibility of the surrounding terrain, can be a machine-assisted ride or a freehand climb. Take these weary workers from Guangdong in South China, who had the unenviable job of repairing a power line that reached a giddying 3,280 feet above sea level. But the disturbing drop isn't the only thing these guys need to be cautious of. Usually power lines fault in extreme weather, like a storm or wildfire. Unfortunately for line workers, that means they face falling debris, slippery surfaces, and heavy gusts of wind, just in case climbing hundreds or even thousands of feet up wasn't terrifying enough. Yet the greatest threat to a line worker's life isn't the height or crazy conditions, but the electrical lines themselves. Power lines that are damaged or improperly handled can cause electrical burns or even electrocution. And considering that line workers typically work with electrical systems that carry at least 11,000 volts, that's not going to be too pleasant. Just 2,700 volts are usually fatal, so imagine the damage that 11,000 volts passing through your body can do. With all these risks, it's no surprise that 42 out of every 100,000 line workers pass away on the job each year, while a further 2,400 per 100,000 suffer serious injuries. On the plus side, these guys bag close to $80,000 every year on average. Still, that doesn't stop line workers from having a shocking occupation. Bridge builders. Whether it's San Francisco's Golden Gate Bridge or London's Tower Bridge, the world's filled with some jaw-dropping crossings. These crazy constructions are the result of bridge builders who risk their lives, all so you can make it safely across to the other side. Take Ice High Bridge in China, for example. This beastie bridge is almost 4,000 feet long, but that's not the most jaw-dropping thing about this superstructure. The bridge stretches over a canyon 1,102 feet in the air, meaning workers building this thing were at a height greater than that of the top of the Eiffel Tower. As you can imagine, the main risk of bridge building from such heights is the fall. One wrong step could lead to a 10-second free fall to Pancake Town, if you get my drift. While workers are usually secured by a harness to stop them from crashing to their end, photos taken on site reveal that wasn't always the case at Ice High Bridge. Across the Pacific Ocean, you'll find New York's Brooklyn Bridge, one of the world's most well-recognized crossings. But did you know about this place's lesser-known horrific history? Sadly, the project that was completed in 1883 took at least 27 lives. Several workmen left this mortal coil after large chunks of stone fell during the construction of the bridge's towers, while others accidentally fell from the towers themselves. If that doesn't sound grisly enough, workers risk their lives for just $2 a day, less than $45 in today's money. Fortunately, nowadays, bridge builders are able to pocket around $60,000 a year. Still, regardless of how much money I'd make, bridge building definitely isn't an occupation I want to cross. Smoke jumper. By the name alone, you know firefighting is a perilous job. I mean, battling a burning building or wading into a fire doesn't sound safe no matter how you phrase it. Well, scary as it sounds, what if I told you it's nothing compared to the job of a smoke jumper? If you didn't know, smoke jumpers are essentially firefighters who jump out of airplanes. Yep, while for many skydiving is their biggest fear, that's just part of a smoke jumper's everyday. Let me explain. Smoke jumpers are specially trained wildland firefighters tasked with putting out remote wildland fires where roads and rail can't reach. Aircraft fly over the forest fire before the smoke jumpers parachute out, landing in what looks like hell on earth. When the smoke jumpers land, firefighting supplies are parachuted down to help them tackle the blaze. But how exactly do you stop a fire without the aid of fire hydrants or fire trucks? Well, smoke jumpers create a fire break. This is a zone that interrupts the fire's fuel source, which they do by quickly cutting down trees and digging trenches in the direction the fire is traveling. Being such a high-risk and high-skilled job, Only about 400 smoke jumpers currently work for the US government. You'd imagine those chosen few would be pretty well compensated, but these guys are typically paid just $50,000 per fire season. Man, you'd think they'd be rewarded more generously for nosediving down to deal with whopping wildfire. Lumberjack. For most of us, a walk through the forest gives us a chance to unwind and feel at one with nature. But after hearing about this next occupation, your next woodland walk may not be so peaceful. With an insane fatal work injury rate of 82 per 100,000, lumberjacking isn't a job for the faint-hearted, and it's not hard to see why. On a daily basis, they handle chainsaws, chippers, choppers, basically equipment that can turn anyone into mincemeat in an instant. But those menacing machines aren't the only dangers they face. There's also the very real risk of lumberjacks being crushed by trees, considering most of their job is chopping them down. And since the average tree lumberjacks work with can weigh up to 5 tons, it's definitely not something you'd want to fall on you. And while lumberjacks use cutting techniques to help direct the fall of a tree, they can't always predict which way it'll fall. Whoa, that's what happens when you cut into a rotten tree and it begins to break apart before it falls. Hella dangerous to be anywhere in the vicinity of, let alone directly underneath it. If that wasn't metal enough, some lumberjacks even hike their way up trees to cut away loose branches. As a result, they can expect tree parts falling down on them all while they're at dizzying heights. If you replay that clip, you can actually hear the disappointment as that tree takes out the garden fence below, instead of landing in the cleared area this lumberjack assumed it would fall into. Well, seeing how dangerous it is, how much do you reckon these guys get paid? $100,000? $200,000? Amazingly, the average lumberjack is paid around just $50,000 a year. Fair to say, for that price, that's a job I would not consider. Lighthouse keeper. Another scary sea-related job is that of a lighthouse keeper. Until the invention of the light bulb, the light in the lighthouse typically came from a flame. A blaze in a confined building? Totally sounds safe. One example of how dangerous this could be was witnessed in 1755 at Eddystone Lighthouse off the coast of southern England. Henry Hall, a 95-year-old lighthouse keeper, discovered that a spark from the light's lantern had ignited the top of the tower. As Hall looked up to throw a bucket of water on the blaze, a stream of molten lead poured down from the roof right into his face and throat. Ouch. Miraculously, he got out of the lighthouse alive, but sadly he passed away 12 days later with half a pound of solid lead stuffed in his stomach. Even in more recent times, the job of a lighthouse keeper is still fraught with danger. Lighthouses are placed in exposed areas that suffer from fierce waves due to their ragged coastlines, allowing ship captains to navigate around them or pinpoint their position by identifying their locations. But big and bulky as they may look, these structures aren't immortal. With batterings from waves, lighthouse structures can wear down over time. Take the Whale Rock Light, a lighthouse off Rhode Island. It stood tall for over 50 years before whopping waves from the New England hurricane of 1938 ripped the structure in two, tragically sending keeper Walter Eberly down with much of the structure. Despite these horror stories, lighthouse keepers aren't rewarded too well either, with the average worker pocketing just $45,000 a year. Man, this job really isn't light work. Iron workers. From the Eiffel Tower to the Empire State Building, our world is filled with some jaw-dropping structures. But have you ever thought about how these monuments were first erected? After all, every big building comes with a structural framework. Well, it's the job of iron workers to install the metal support pieces for new buildings as well as repair and renovate old structures. But building the framework for these things ain't easy. In all, this profession has 47 fatalities for every 100,000 workers. Iron workers tend to work hundreds of feet in the air with just a harness, most of the time, preventing them from becoming a splat on the pavement. That's not even mentioning the crazy conditions these workers can face. I mean, imagine walking along a single iron beam hundreds of feet in the air while strong winds are threatening to push you off the side. he shouldn't look that relaxed. But it's not just the threat of things below that ironworkers need to watch out for. There's also the risk of giant swinging iron beams crashing into them, turning their 9 to 5 into some wicked wipeout course hundreds of feet in the air. So next time you take a trip to the Eiffel Tower or marvel at the Empire State Building, spare thought for those lion-hearted laborers that constructed these stunning structures in the first place.